Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode with Fan Fiction. We are your hosts. I am Akash,
And I'm Sarang.
and we've got you a new episode on the preseason testing with Formula One 2021. We dive into this episode with what's occurred on the 3 days, any news coming out of press conferences, and our thoughts on what these 3 days have been. If we formed any speculation, stay tuned to see if we have. And you can listen to us on any of your favorite podcast streaming apps. Starting off, Sarang, what is preseason testing? Let's get some perspective there first.
Okay, so all these teams have spent a lot of time in the last couple of months trying to develop their cars and bring in new innovations with aerodynamics, engine, and try to improve their performance and improve their lap times around the various tracks that they're going to participate in. But overall, the only way for them to validate these innovations is by testing them on the track. And there are a lot of limitations that FIA places in terms of how are the teams allowed to actually uh, test their cars on track. And most of this testing is done on simulators, and these simulators are at the bleeding edge of technology, but still they don't give you the same results as actually testing things in real life. Usually what happens is the testing is structured over 2 weeks, and each of those sessions has 4 days, so these teams have in all 8 days, which is a lot more than what they received this year. This year, since the last season ended so late, there was very little time remaining for testing this year, and essentially there were only 3 days of testing, so these teams had to scramble to fit in everything in those 3 days essentially.
Right, so there is less time, and I think everyone's scrambling to get most out of their track time, try and learn their new cars. I think it's going to be all the more challenging for a few new folks on the track, right? Like we've got quite a few new drivers on the track with new cars. The first one up that comes to mind is Yuki Tsunoda coming in from Carlin Motor Racing in Formula 2. Red Bull's sister team, or Red Bull's school, if you will, filling in that second position at Alpha Tauri. Right, so big hopes from him. Haas has got a brand new team as well.
Yep, that's right. For a while, Haas has had the same two drivers, Grosjean and what's oh man, what's his name?
Magnussen.
Oh yeah, right, Magnussen. Yeah, once you leave F1, people just forget you. So yeah. Yeah, anyways, so they have two new drivers. First is Mick Schumacher, who is the son of the legendary Michael Schumacher. And there's another rookie that's joining the team this year. That's Nikita Mazepin, who will be partnering Mick Schumacher.
That's true. That's true. And then we have another new driver, fairly old, I would say, not young. Some guy named Fernando Alonso.
Never heard of him.
I haven't seen him race much in F1 last year. So it'll be interesting to see how the rookie performs.
A rookie who's come back from his retirement.
Right. I got into some bicycling racing, and he's a rookie there too, because apparently he got into an accident as well.
Oh yeah. Oh well, that was a thing of concern for Alpine for a bit, because I think he had been hit by a car while cycling, and there were rumors that he had fractured his jaw or something, or I think he had probably just injured his jaw. But either ways, the old man gathered things up and appeared for testing in Bahrain. So good for him.
Yeah, it was good to see him back in form on the track in the car. Lovely new drivers on the track. Diving into day one, a bit of a sandstorm happening on day one. Track conditions warm and windy. Everyone's trying to collect card data, but struggling to get that grip on the track. What were some highlights, and what are your thoughts on day one?
Yes. So day one generally is when these teams are testing their cars pretty much for the first time on the track.
That's accurate.
I mean, they do get some time before testing to test out their cars for media days, basically. But this is pretty much the first time that they're doing like real laps on the track and really pushing their cars and like making sure that their innovations that they're working on are actually bringing in results.
Yeah, that's true, and we've seen everyone struggling, not just from a driver's perspective, but also from the engineering side of things, where we've seen a couple of gearbox issues or powertrain issues. The first ones coming in from heavy lifters like Mercedes itself, with Bottas only pitting 6 laps and then sitting out for the rest of the day. Mick Schumacher, who the greater part of the world is looking forward to see on the track, also ran into similar issues with Haas.
Yeah, and did you know that Mercedes had actually foregone their media days, and they basically lost the opportunity to, uh, fire up the engine and do some initial basic testing for the media days. What basically happened was it was raining really heavily at Silverstone, and they decided that it's just not worth testing anything in this rain because the results are going to be all over the place. But essentially, that came back to bite them because they wasted so much time on day one because of all the issues.
That's right. Even Hamilton has been struggling on day one. We've seen him somewhat spin on day two, but we'll come to day two. On day one, it's just not been easy, even for heavy lifters like
Talking about heavy lifters, did you notice how many laps Red Bull did on day one? It was about 169 laps.
Yeah, they've been showing quite some reliability there. It's a renewed Red Bull because I think they have got this good contention for the title this year after coming off of a very strong season last year.
Mm-hmm. That too, considering that last year pretty much Max was the only driver contributing to these points. Consider what they could achieve with Sergio Perez this time.
Yeah, I mean, overall from testing, I've been impressed with Sergio's performance as well. Not to overshadow Red Bull's B team, Alpha Tauri, although Yuki ran out of fuel and had to end testing early. I think it was still a good day for both the teams, showing that Honda engine reliability and putting good number of laps. Gasly sounded very positive after his day one. So yeah, I mean, I have my fingers crossed for Red Bull.
Oh yeah, Red Bull has been doing pretty good this year in terms of testing. And another thing that I've heard is Honda basically has come out with a new engine this year, and they say that this is based off a new platform entirely. And since this is pretty much their last year as an engine manufacturer, they are kind of going all in with this year's engine. And they claim this that this new engine is faster than the Mercedes's 2020 engine, which would probably make things a lot interesting.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that Constructor Champions trophy go to a different team. Although I don't mind seeing Hamilton on the podium, I'd love to see Max and Carlos be there way more than the men in black that I'm used to seeing last year and the previous years.
Yes, certainly. I think pretty much almost all fans all around the world of F1 are longing for the days when results become a little more unpredictable than what they
Yeah.
currently are. So everyone's definitely rooting for Honda and Red Bull, because I feel that through the past couple of years, Red Bull has gained a lot of performance. They have covered a lot of ground as compared to Mercedes, and having a super consistent driver like Max.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this year, he has a teammate who would give him the support that he needs. So we can expect good things from Red Bull this year.
That's true. Well, fingers crossed.
Well, actually, talking about engines, let's talk a little bit about the Ferrari engine. Considering all the issues that Ferrari had last year and all the power that they had lost last year because of the cheating and then the settlement that they did with FIA and everything, Mattia Binotto basically claims that they have made up all the power that they had lost in last year. And from what he claims, it seems like they will be more competitive, though probably not at the front, but still they'll be pretty close to be at the top of the so-called Formula 1.5 series that goes up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I chuckled a bit there on their day one performance because Ferrari came in with the hopes of driving with their new power unit in hopes of getting some redemption done. And then I started laughing because the immediate next moment was Leclerc coming to a halt due to power unit issues. But nonetheless, I mean, I joke here, but nonetheless, I agree with you that they do have that good shot from what Matea says of being at the top of the midfield or so-called 1.5 Formula One.
Mhm. Yeah, let's hope for Ferrari's sake and for all the legacy that they have, that they do make, they do cover some ground this year. And I hate to see them at the sixth position that they're at right now at. So yeah. Speaking of Ferrari, let's also talk a little bit about their B team, which is Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo, for a couple of years, except for the last year, actually was doing pretty good in the rest of, the back of the field, basically. But I think last year they lost a lot of ground, and I'm looking at the performance that Giovinazzi put in on the day one of testing. I have some renewed hopes for this team. And considering that he put in around 139 laps, that kind of also shows that they do
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
reliability that they need.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping that Alpha does a lot better next year. And another good performance put in was by Lance Stroll. He went fourth fastest on day one, which is quite good. Though, in quite honesty, the timings that we see for testing are oftentimes not really comparable
Agree.
because a lot of these teams are doing different simulations. Some are doing long high fuel runs, some are doing qualification simulations, some are trying to test their new aero innovation. So while Stroll was the fourth fastest, we still have to kind of wait to see what kind of a performance this green Mercedes delivers this year.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's been an interesting day one. I wouldn't want to also take away what Williams did on day one, where they only drove their test driver, Roy Nissany. He could be that next driver for
Mhm.
Williams coming in from the DAMS team in F2. Williams surprisingly looks promising to me, on contrary to what their livery had made me think about them. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful to see what Williams does during the races. It was an interesting day, nonetheless, with renewed hopes on day two. My 2 cents there is, if day one was all about gearbox issues, day two was quite a lot about spinning, with Science spinning, Latifi spinning, Hamilton's pulled a Vettel and sort of almost beached his car, bringing in the red flags. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of spins. I think it's all got to do with day one being a short day, and most teams having some of the other issues. And all of these drivers are, I mean, obviously they're practicing on their own simulators, but still, you know, driving these cars at the edge of their performance is a very difficult task. And even if you have been practicing a lot on your simulators, it still is a lot different to actually drive these cars on the track. It's been so long since they have driven these cars, they're bound to make mistakes, and I feel it's better to make these mistakes right now than after the season starts.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see Hamilton blaming the rear of the car not feeling right on regulation changes. Although he may be right, but hey, I am an opinionated guy about Hamilton, although I like him as a driver now since his 7 year streak. But ham's ham for me.
Well, if you've noticed, Bottas was also kind of talking about something similar, that the rear end of the Mercedes is not as stable as it earlier was. Though I'm not entirely sure whether this is just some pre-scripted words that they're saying just because they want to show that they are not at the top of the game. I mean, Mercedes always does this, right? Like each year we see during testing, they are not always the fastest, and come Australia, they are right there at the pole position. And not just the pole position, they're at 1 2. And as like everybody loves calling this as sandbagging, basically, just pretend that you don't have the performance and fool your competitors into
Yeah.
believing that
Oh, yeah.
you're not at the top of the game. Another interesting thing that happened on day two is Perez's engine cover apparently was ripped off on a straight while he
Yeah.
was coming off the back of Latifi, and he was just trying to overtake Latifi, and yeah, his engine cover just blew off, and it was shattered into pieces, and like it was all over the track. I think they had to red flag the session again. There were
Yeah.
two red flags in one day. Basically, they had to halt the whole session, clean up the track, because these pieces, because most of the body of these cars is carbon fiber, and once carbon fiber shatters, it creates these tiny sharpener like pieces which
Mhm, mhm,
just destroy these tires on the cars. So they have to like ensure that all of these pieces are removed from the road, otherwise one of the piece could really harm one of these drivers.
mhm, mhm. Speaking of incidents, I mean, Haas was not privy to escaping it either. Nikita was, I guess, in the zone for racing. I guess he was almost gonna run off few folks off the track. Luckily, he didn't. So yeah,
Wow.
that's positive. And in the pit lanes too, Haas was having dramas with Mick probably being overexcited, starting off his car maybe just a second earlier, and overrunning his front jack in the pits. No harm done and no damage is done, so that's the good part. But it shows that even if the team's not that ready,
Hmm.
both the drivers are in full on action to show their mettle on the racetrack. But talking of issues, there were issues with Aston Martin too, right, Sarang?
Oh yeah, that's what I was just about to say. When you said that all drivers are trying to prove their worth on the track, unfortunately, Sebastian Vettel did not get this opportunity through
Poor
the
guy.
first 2 days
Poor.
because he constantly had issues. I think on day two he had gearbox issues, and on day one, I think he had some fuel related issues, if I'm not wrong.
But for me, a bigger controversy came from his ex teammate, Charles Leclerc. During one of the drivers' conferences, he was asked, do you think you are the new team leader for Ferrari? I mean, it's an obvious question from press because he's got a new teammate, Carlos Sainz, in there who's also going to try to prove his mettle. but his response, his first words were, "Well, I have more time with Ferrari than Carlos, so it could be, but I don't think there is a leader." I mean, I sort of see this as a beginning of a sour relation, although he tried to cover it up, but he still went ahead saying that he's got more time, showing that mentally he's probably thinking he's a leader, even though the team doesn't have any of that stand. So, overall, I think an interesting, controversial, fun filled day to.
No, I think overall day two was a little better for everybody in the sense that teams were able to actually put in some good laps, and they were actually able to gauge the performances of their cars. And so, yeah, I think overall day two was much better. And to think of it, actually, Mercedes had a pretty good day on day two after all the
Mhm, mhm.
speculation that
Yeah,
went
yeah.
on day one with all their gearbox issues. Valtteri Bottas was at the top of the charts on day two. So, there you have it. Mercedes, you cannot underestimate them. They still are 7-time world champion, and you still have to give them their due respect. Another person who did really well on day two was Pierre Gasly. As we had talked earlier as well, I think Pierre has really found his home at
Oh
AlphaTauri.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Somehow he has gelled up with the team so well. He is in tune with the car so well that I think we can expect great things from Pierre this year. He was second on the charts, and yeah, I feel that AlphaTauri would probably play a larger role than just being a B team at Red Bull this year if Pierre continues to deliver this performance.
Agree. Totally agree.
All right. So let's move on to the day three of testing. Day one and day two, I think most teams were trying to work out all their issues. This was their first times trying to test out their cars, and they were trying to make all the mistakes early on as they could so that they don't make these mistakes when the season begins. So relatively speaking, day 3 was a much better day with a lot fewer incidents,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and most of these teams had quite a smooth running, as you could see Williams as well doing decently, Russell in particular doing good. And I think in one of the press conferences he mentioned that Williams would probably have a kind of a yo-yo effect this year where they might be quite quick on some tracks and
Yeah.
really slow on the others. So that's something to look forward to. I'm kind of tired to see Williams on the 19th and 20th position race after race. So I'm really hoping that they are at least able to score some points this season, because I think that itself would be a, a large step for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Williams makes up ground this year. And talking about good performances, Yuki Tsunoda is another driver who really did well on day three. I think he came in second, right behind Max, and I think that's a great feat because Yuki it's his rookie year. AlphaTauri is a very competitive team with Pierre Gasly as his teammate, and I think he has a lot to prove. I'm sure he's super excited for this opportunity because being an AlphaTauri is pretty much an express ticket to get into Red Bull, and
Mm-hmm.
every junior driver wants to go to Red Bull because I think Red Bull is one of the few top teams rather, which is always eager to pick up these young drivers. Like teams like Mercedes and Ferrari are oftentimes really reluctant to give their second seat to new drivers. And I mean, even if to think about it, right, like recently they have had all of the drivers have been so young. Even to think of Max, when Max joined Red Bull, he was barely 18, right? I think there was a point when he was driving F1 cars and he didn't have a license to drive a regular car, which
That's
speaks
true.
for itself. Yeah, and Max also had an amazing performance during this testing. He topped the chart on day one as well as day three. I think that just comes to show how consistent Max has become these days. I think that Hamilton should be a little worried that if Red Bull does deliver a car with which Max can fight Hamilton, I think he's going to have some problems.
That's true, and it's not just gonna be Red Bull because I mean at least not 2021, but there is some good hopes coming in from Ferrari as well because with the drivers' press conference towards the end when we have
Mhm.
team principals talking, Matteo sounded very confident for the car. At least on the straights, he was self-aware that they probably don't have a fight for the top this year, but they do see themselves contending good for that midfield and the Formula F 1.5 position. My concerns, though, are only with Haas, probably because they've openly said that they are not going to be concentrating on 2021.
I wish I could say that at my job.
They are looking already into 2022. The drivers are eager to prove themselves, and we could see that in day three with Mazepin almost again running into what was a spun Lewis on the track. But that just gives me hopes for Williams as well, because I can see them finishing at least ahead of Haas in this season. So fingers crossed for that. Overall, day three, yeah, drivers trying to get more laps in, getting themselves comfortable with their car. Wrapping thoughts on day three from you, Sarang.
Yeah, I think overall day three was relatively a dull day from the perspective of audience. Teams must be really happy because there was no shenanigans. It was all, you know, all boring as it should be from their perspective. Things should be as predictable as possible, and that's how it was. So I think overall, they must have gathered a lot of good data, which they would be analyzing over the next couple of weeks, tuning their cars, getting them ready for the next race, which starts on 28th of March at Bahrain. So yeah, I think overall it was a successful day for all the teams.
With 3 days of testing done, there was definitely some tech that stood out and some innovations that stood out, right, Sarang? And the first one for me, at least, was Alpha Tauri's in quotes fancy nose, which is interesting because what they've done is they've housed a camera in that fancy nose only to monitor this front wing flexing. I mean, it's illegal to have front wing flexing, but it's also impossible to avoid it with high speeds. So they've dropped in a camera there
Hmm.
to monitor the airflow and a front wing flexing for Alpha Tauri. What were some other innovations that stood out for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think Red Bull really stood out this time. I think there has been a lot of talk this year that with the changes in the regulations for the floor, a lot of chatter going on that Red Bull is probably going to gain some advantage here because the way Red Bull cars are designed, they generally have a higher rake. Basically, what that means is that they have the rear end of the car higher as compared to the front of the car, which gives them a little bit of a ground effect. Ground effect is nothing but a drag that air produces when it goes under the car, which
Uh
creates a
huh.
kind of a suction effect, and that really helps the car stick to the ground. And at the speeds at which these cars are going, this ground effect is really important because it gives them good traction without actually adding any aerodynamic drag. So that way they can go faster and they can take the corners faster, which basically translates into faster lap times.
Didn't
So
McLaren also do something to add something similar to their benefit there?
Oh yeah, there has been a lot of talk about this. So, McLaren has basically come up with kind of a rare diffuser, and that also kind of creates this ground effect, which again kind of really would help them to carry speeds through these corners, and that definitely is going to shave off some few seconds of their lap times. And with the new Mercedes engine that they're housing in their car, I think they are going to have this extra performance, which they would have to compensate with having better aerodynamics so that they can actually use that extra performance to gain some lap time. Talking about ground effect, you can see that the field is kind of divided a little in terms of rake angles, and you can see that the cars which are more similar to Mercedes type designs have a lower rake angle. And this was actually advantageous for all of these cars in the older regulations, where you were allowed to have slits in your floor, which is now banned this year. And with that change on the
Interesting.
floor,
Interesting.
the cars which have a higher rake angle, like Red Bull, are going to gain some advantage, or at least that is what everybody's speculating. But one interesting thing which I saw was that a Mercedes has actually come up with an innovation to counter the lower raking angle that they have. So, since slits were banned on the floor, they have come up with this new design where they actually mold the floor into peaks and valleys so that it simulates the effect of slits on the floor without actually having slits on the floor.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Yeah, we see these innovations coming in from Mercedes every year, and it's just, I mean, it makes me go.
Just blows your mind, right?
See, I am out of words. My brain just slows down. Yeah. But also talking about unusual concepts, there is Alpine's massive airbox on top of their car, which has stood out for me. They what they've done is sort of taken a concept of central line cooling. What that essentially means is they've taken all their radiators and as such and put it on top of their car with that center airflow duct. Albeit it raises their center of
Mhm.
gravity and it may be a bad thing, but experts say that it also increases and gives them a best aero performance. So only time's gonna tell how that car is gonna perform. Is it gonna be performing as good as it looks?
Oh yeah, and did you also notice that Alpine was actually testing out two different rear ends of the car, or rather, two different engine covers of the car, where one was a pretty sleek engine cover with a larger back fin, and one was a much chunkier engine cover. I guess that they
Yeah,
kind of know about the higher center of gravity that they have with this larger air intake, and I think they
yeah,
are trying out different solutions to make sure that this does not affect their aero performance.
agree, agree. But well, Sarang, after all of this exciting 3 days, innovations, and fingers crossed on whatever's going to happen throughout the rest of the year, what I want to ask you is a different form of our episode ending tradition, which is what are your top three predictions from drivers and what are your top three predictions from constructors?
Oh well, predictions. This is going to be interesting. uh, Let me think. All right, number one for me would be Pierre Gasly gets number 8 on the drivers championship. I feel that Pierre has been gaining a lot of momentum with his race win last year, and overall strong performances throughout the season, with Alpha Tauri improving their performance, him gelling so well with the team, as well as Honda coming up with entirely new design for their engine. I think all these factors might really help Pierre to beat the other folks and get that eighth position. The second prediction for me is for Daniel Ricciardo. I would predict with him going to McLaren, that's just going to probably improve his confidence. Last year, we saw Daniel at the fifth position at Drivers' Championship, but since he's changing teams, I think he'll continue to hold that position. And I think he might have a couple of not so good races at the start of the season, but he'll soon get in tune with the car and bring the fight to Aston Martin as well as Alpine. And I think he'll maintain his position as fifth on the board. The third prediction for me would be for George Russell. I predict that he will finally get his point in the Williams, and I hope this is the year for him. And yeah, so he probably will end up not at the 19th position and somewhere a little above, probably 17th or 18th.
Well, so for me, the driver predictions go. I mean, I want to start off with my favorite driver on the track who's back, Fernando Alonso. It's going to be interesting seeing him, but I still think he's going to have a good year, just bringing that good experience for him, bringing that good experience from him. I think is going to be seven on the grid of drivers champions. Next up for me is Perez. He's going to give that good fight on that top leaderboard, and I see him as P4. And Sainz, although the car's not going to perform as good as fans hope, but I think he's going to get that points. He's going to finish above Leclerc on the table.
Wow, that's a bold prediction.
But how about constructors, Sarang?
Well, for me, I think Red Bull. I think Red Bull would finally bring the fight to Mercedes. I
Mm-hmm.
still don't. I'm not confident that they will win the Constructors' Championship, but I think finally there would be some fight at the Constructors' Championship with Sergio Perez joining the team. And as I talked about earlier, the new engine from Honda, and also considering all the talk that's been going around about Red Bull having an advantage in terms of having a car that's more suited to the new regulations. If Red Bull are able to remove all their reliability issues, I think that this year would finally be the year when we actually see a title fight. The second prediction for me would be for Alpine. I think Alpine has been doing good. They are slowly gaining that momentum year over year. Last year they were fifth on the on the constructors championship, and they were actually quite close to Racing Point. So I think that they'll continue to hold the fifth position that they had last year, but this year they probably will be closer to Aston Martin and McLaren as compared to the last year. So probably this is going to be a strong year for them as well. The third team that I want to talk about is Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo has always been a small team which punches a lot above their weight. Last year was probably an exception, and I would say it was not entirely their fault. Pretty much everybody knows what happened with the Ferrari engine, and that directly translated into terrible results for all the Ferrari customer teams. And Alfa Romeo was obviously a victim of the same issue. if what Mattia has been talking about the improvements in the Ferrari engine are true, I think Alpha would do a lot better this year. Last year they were eighth, and I'm hoping that they I don't think that they'll be seventh on the board because AlphaTauri has been doing really good, but I feel that they would not be 100 points behind the seventh position as they were last year. I think they would be a lot closer, and I think that they would be the clear winners at the end of the constructors table.
Yeah, for me, I think Aston Martin's are gonna have a good season. I think it's gonna either, well, let's say fourth on the table. I was gonna say either third or fourth, but let's say fourth on the table. Merck is gonna bore me, and they are gonna continue winning that constructor title. So I think Sarang, you and I are gonna have good contention if Red Bull keeps winning versus, to my want from the championship, Merck keeps winning. My third prediction is for Williams because I'm excited for them having a new technical director, Jensen Button, as their technical advisor. I think they're gonna not finish last on the table this year, and it's gonna be P9 for them on the table with probably Haas, but I don't know who's gonna be below them, but I think it's gonna be Haas below them.
Hey Akash, how about this? I have an idea. Let's do something different. Let's throw in a wildcard prediction. What I mean by that is give me the wildest prediction that you can make, and let's see if that comes true.
That's interesting. You know what? I'm going to continue with my optimism on Williams. And I say that out of the 20 drivers, Russell finishes 14th or 15th. That high up out of the 20 drivers. What's yours?
For me, I think it would be kind of a continuation of last year. I think we are going to see the super substitute that's Nico Hulkenberg back on the track, replacing somebody for sure again this
Oh,
season.
wow. Yeah.
And considering all the COVID waves still going on over the world, there is still a high chance of some driver catching it and Nico being in the right position to come and substitute for them.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that. Well, folks, with that, you have it. This was another episode from Fan Fiction on our thoughts about the pre testing season. Coming forward, we'll dive into the race weeks. It's going to be so exciting with these new colors and the unpredictableness from the pre testing that we take into these weekends. So tune in to hear more about these weekends and our banter and our thoughts on those races. And you can again listen us on any of your favorite streaming platforms. Until next time, bye folks.
Bye bye.